So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about card count. So, if we have, let's say, a 40 card deck, a 50 card deck, 41 cards, how does this affect deck building? Well, honestly, just pull up the calculator, just if you pull up the calculator, you will know. So, pulling up the calculator today, and we'll just take a look, I guess. Pretty simple. So, we're going to assume we have a card with just like a random one of. So in this case, that'd be the equivalent of, I guess, like a grass that looks greener. Just throw in one copy of grass. So one copy of grass in 60. What are the odds of opening this? So we'll plug it into the calculator, right? And the odds probably not that surprising, but all right. So assuming we're at 40 cards, so it wouldn't be a usable grass right now. Our probability is at 12.5% to open a just one of, right? If we increase the copies in our deck, so then we would adjust the numbers here a little bit. But yeah, it more or less doubles the probability. So we round here. So 20% chance more or less to open a two of, 10% chance to open a one of. So yeah, that's how that works. Let's change the card count from 40 to 60. 8.3. So pretty much still 10% chance. Oddly enough, a random one of. So the probability on opening a random one of, it's not actually that different. I mean, it's a little bit different. So if we take this at a scale of like out of 100 games, you're opening your random one of, so in this case, the grass that looks greener, uh, 4 games less. So that means if we play a single random garnet, so in this case, we'll say Cyframe Driver, the probability of opening Cyframe Driver is still pretty much around 10%. It doesn't really change. So when you're running garnets in a 60 card deck, it's still not that beneficial. As you can see, you would still want to, in general, cut those garnets down. Is that this will compound with every single like garnet you add. It very much increases like really fast. So let's assume we're running, in this case it'll be 3 garnets. So here 23.33%, and then with 40 card 33.76%. So the odds of opening multiple garnets is going to be lower in 60 than in 40, but if it's just singular, it's not that beneficial. So yeah, that's how it goes. You're still relatively likely to open the garnets, right? I don't really like 23.3% because that's 1 in 5 games or 1 in 3 games. I don't know, I guess I'm a garnet hater. And then like if we want to be really outrageous and we run 6, then 42.08 to open at least 1, right? And then this one 57.63. So there is a difference, but relatively speaking, it's still around like 50%. So not absurdly a big fan of this. So if we just change and say we have, I'll go with, 12 is pretty standard now. 12 one card starters, right? And we want to open at least one of them. We can change the max here to 5. So 85.06 chance to open a starter 60 cards, 68.65%. So the odds of opening starters will lower, but if you are playing 60 cards, you just need to maintain ratios mostly. So because you have all this extra deck space, I mean, assuming you do have other ways to that same starter, you can just throw those in, and then let's say we throw in an additional 6, we go to 18%. It's not that much different, right? But if we were to just throw in like random stuff, of course the probability will lower by a moderate amount. So 12%, here in this case from, well, actually, what was it, 11? Yeah, no, it's like 13%. Wait, is it 13? No, it's not. It's 17% decrease. So out of 100 games, you will see a starter. Well, if you make no like normal adjustments because you did convert your deck to 60, um, the odds have decreased from, what was it, like 85% to 68%, which is a decent amount, I guess, but it's not that much different. It is still hanging around 70%, so that's something. But if we were to not go as extreme, so now we have we're back to 40, so that's 85.06. We just bump up our deck size to 45. We only lose 5% here, and now we have more deck space to throw in like a few other cards. So in this case, we could throw in like, I guess, one copy of Nibiru, one copy of like Maxi, and then well, this depends on like how many starters you actually have in the deck, because you want to be very aware of your ratios and what cards you're trying to open and how many you're trying to open. In terms of probability, right, this isn't going to affect us too negatively. But yeah, we go, let's say Nib Maxi, and what else? I guess 3 copies of Effect Failure for going second, maybe, or 3 Droll, something like that. And these would be additional on top of what you would already have, maybe. You would already have Maxi, so I guess we'll go with, like, what's another good random count one of? I guess Triple Tactics is not, like, too offensive here, you know? So you can just throw these additionally with whatever you already have, and you just have these, and you have a chance to open them now. Or if you resolve like Fulos or Maxi, you also have a chance to draw into these now. Whereas, of course, if you didn't have them in your deck and you maintain 40, you're struggling to keep all the cards you want into your deck, I guess, because they're just, in general, so many good cards now that you're actually struggling to cut cards, in the sense that you want to play this card and that card, but it'll put you over 40. So you can just go a little bit over 40 and your consistency isn't affected that much. And this is also useful for, like, just dealing with back row in general. So there's the idea of, if we run one Duster, we have a 1 in 10 chance to win the game. So we'll just assume it's a auto win against certain like stun variants or something like that. Like, could be Duster, could be a red reboot, could be like whatever back row removal card is relevant at the moment, right? But if you don't have it in your deck, the odds of opening it is 0%, and then you have no chance of opening it at all, of course. But yeah, going back to the calculator now. If we go ahead and change the maths on this a little bit, how about a 1 of? What are the odds of opening a 1 of? It drops down by like 1%, but it was already a 1 of, so in 1 out of 100 games, you will no longer see that 1 of in your opening hand, but it's a 1 of. You shouldn't be counting on opening it anyways, a lot of the time. But there is, in general, I would say, a lot of reason, more so in Master Duel, to go to 45, and that's just having more flexibility in your deck. Like, if you lack back row removal, just throwing in that one extra kind of useful-ish back row removal card could be a game changer. So in this case, that wouldn't necessarily be Duster. That could be like a Red Reboot, is actually surprisingly versatile. You can use this on like an infinite impermanence, shuts down all of the Dominus cards if you're against a deck that might attempt to spam some Dominus cards. This is more ideal where you can actually remove the back row that your opponent will set off of the red reboot and the initial card they activated, of course, but just general idea. You red reboot. You could also have a what was it called again? Cosmic Cyclone. Yeah. So this is useful in a variety of ways. Like, for example, with Millennium, we can banish the field spell. We can banish the monsters in the back row. There are all sorts of little things that you can kind of do with Cosmic like that. And then, of course, going second, we could do like Banish Cross, and it's not too bad, not too shabby, you know? And we just really just want to maintain our ratios of what we're opening. So like you're going second cards, you only want like maybe we're thinking in terms of percentage, like going second cards 50% or 40% of your cards to be like that, and then 60% first. Or well, I mean it depends on like the archetype, right? Maybe you would want maybe 60% going second cards, and then like 30% of your cards be like going first cards, because you have like all one card starters and you can afford to run that many hand traps. It's like more or less case by case. So yeah, continuing on here, messing with card count a bit. Let's assume we have, well, once again 12 starters. Let's adjust the deck size a little bit. So from 45 to 46, it's just like 1% probability getting adjusted a little bit, and then 50, 76%, 55, 72%. It's actually not that important what your deck size is. I think what's more important is just like in general the ratio for your deck, but in some cases it is more worthwhile having lower card count. So if we want to open a specific card and not just the type of card, so in this case, let's say we're screwed if we don't open specifically like Drone Lockbird, then 40 cards, it's going to be a little bit better, but not even by that much. Oh, that's wrong. So if we go from 40 to 45, there's a 3% smaller chance of us opening um Droll, basically, right? I mean, it is less, but not by that much. It won't be noticeable. Well, unless you play hundreds of thousands of games. And if you did want to see like certain cards more, then that's when you would adjust back down to 40, I guess. And this is only really relevant, I think, in a more or less tier 0 format where the only deck that's playable is like a certain deck. So you just want the specific one and only counter that exists to this deck, because nothing else is legitimately viable. So in this case, that's an option. So even against stun, going to 40 isn't necessarily useful. If we were at 45, we can just slot in like a few extra like backer removal cards. So like slap in 3 copies of Cosmic, 1 copy of like Evenly, and then that'd probably be fine. And then like 1 other card to help balance out the ratios a little bit, I guess. Maybe like star card, maybe you full send it and add the 5th backer removal card. I mean, it will affect the quality of your hands a little bit, but aside from that, card count, it legitimately doesn't affect the game as much as you would think. That it's like just insane min-max kind of stuff. So of course, like there is like an optimal ratio and then an optimal probability to open certain cards in certain situations, and that'll kind of depend on the meta. And there are just times you'll just end up getting lucky, and it is what it is. But I mean, if you're playing in a more competitive sense, you might want to mess around with the calc a bit, kind of figure out what you want. But for the most part, it genuinely doesn't affect gameplay that much. Like, it does get affected, don't get me wrong, it's just very minimal. It's like 1%. So that's like 1 in 100 games um that'll affect one game. It won't really affect like 10 games per se, right? So for example, let's say we'll just drop Ryziel, I guess, right? Let's say you're playing a Ryziel list. So something that looks kind of like this, and we're going to just take out all these Brillias and Molcharmies, and we'll just throw in literally the entirety of Exodia. And of course, this doesn't really do much, but we'll just do a quick test hand. How affected are we by this? Surprisingly, not that much, right? If you consider what I actually replaced, this hand would have been like completely bricked and unplayable anyways because I just replaced the Molcharmies. So nothing really changed about this. And then here we don't even see a single piece of Exodia, right? And then assuming we draw off of the fact of the field spell, then we just draw the right arm. Cool. That doesn't really change anything here. And then this hand, it's just bricked in the same kind of way. And then here we don't see a single piece of Exodia. No pieces, right? And here we have one once again. Seeing if I can see a hand with like 3. And yeah, we're not seeing hand with 3 pieces. But yeah, that the odds and probability that you would mess around with here. If you mess around with the card draw, that might help you visualize it a little bit if you can't really visualize it, I guess. So if we were to then go to 45, so we put in the Molcharmies again, and instead now this would be the equivalent of throwing in the 5 random Exodia pieces on top of your existing deck. What does that look like? So here, we don't see a single piece, don't see a single piece, 1 piece, you know? Nothing really changing here. We're barely seeing any pieces of Exodia here, even though we put in all 5 pieces. So, yeah, I mean, deck building, it affects the game in a lot of ways, right? But at the same time, it's not as impactful as you might think because, yeah, we could just, as a handicap, for example, you could just throw in 5 pieces of Exodia into your deck and still be relatively fine, right? Because we're not really opening more than 1 piece 2 of Exodia. In fact, I haven't seen any piece of Exodia in a while with these test hands at 45, but yeah. The thoughts, I guess, of opening 2 specific cards together might get muddied up a little bit, I guess, with running so many cards. But in our like 1 card combo starter kind of like deck building process that exists now, like, oh, what does this really change? It doesn't really change much now, does it? In fact, I'm barely seeing these pieces of Exodia despite putting in 5, so yeah. Very small difference and affects probability a little bit. So, in short, just don't really be too afraid of going over 40. You don't want to like get too crazy with it necessarily though. Like going as far as 60 cards, you're a bit far gone from me, dog, but you know, you do what you gotta do. And it's all situational. Like with ratios and stuff, it depends on the deck a little bit, and then a few other factors like what you might want to be playing against. So it's not necessarily the meta, but let's say I really want to obliterate, I don't know, what's a deck that no one really plays? Altergeist. I just completely hate Altergeist for whatever reason today. There are certain things I can do to spite Altergeist specifically. So maybe like, let's see, you have Altergeist Hextia, which negates, that this only negates spells and traps. So is there a monster I can use to kind of cook this? Not super hard because there's protocol, but there are hand traps you can run that are really targeted. Like, I guess Shifter would be targeted for this. And then playing a deck that specifically counters the macro, I guess. Yeah, you just throw in like a couple of copies of Rib Reboot as well. Or Alta guys, I don't think anyone would commit that hard, but you know, you could. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.